Picmonic is a quick and effective aid to help you pass your NP boards. They utilize 2-minute videos that connect difficult-to-remember facts with unforgettable characters. By tying facts together into ridiculously memorable stories, you'll be able to retain the information for test day. They help reinforce what you learn and track your progress with thousands of built-in rapid review multiple choice quizzes. The use of the intelligent space repetition algorithms automatically adjust to your learning needs, so you'll be reminded to review the right information at the right time, increasing long-term retention. Picmonic is also integrated into the True Learn question bank, so you can study exactly what you need and test your knowledge. Check them out today if you're preparing for board. Link in the show notes. Attention all nurse practitioners and NP students, are you tired of feeling the disconnect between clinical rotations and didactic teaching? Say hello to Success NP's clinical booklet guides.
As NPs ourselves, we know how valuable it is to have a resource that helps bridge the gap between clinical and class. So we created the digital resource to do just that. Our clinical booklets cover 5 major NP tracks: psych, adult, peds, family, and women's health. Success NPs wants to create tools and provide support NPs need to thrive in their careers.
So why wait? Check out our Success NP Etsy shop, linked in the show notes, for our digital guides and other digital clinical resources. Hi, Success NP. Today we are joined by our 2 fabulous guests, as well as Jackie, our co-host. We're having Anna Job on the podcast. She's a new graduate CRNA working in NYC. And prior to her anesthesia training, she worked as a travel COVID ICU nurse and a CV ICU nurse from coast to coast. She's the co-founder of the Confident Care Academy, an online educational resource for critical care nurses, as well as aspiring CRNAs. And we also are joined by Chrissy Massaro, who has been a CRNA since 2017. And she currently specializes in cardiac and obstetric anesthesia, and she practices in the Big Apple as well. She is the co-founder of the Confident Care Academy as well, which is, as I said, an online resource for acute care NP. Welcome, ladies, to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
All right. So can you guys just go ahead and jump down the deep dive here on both of you, either one of you can take it, kind of your path to becoming a CRNA, because you both are CRNAs. One's more new, but kind of talk about your paths and how you got to the spot where you are today.
Do you want to go first, Anna, since it's a little more recent for you?
And I think we have pretty different paths to kind of end up where we are. I'll start with my story. I knew first that I wanted to be a nurse, and my grandfather lived with me when I was 13 to 14 years old. On Mother's Day, when I turned 14, he got heart transplant. So I was really involved in caregiving and seeing acute heart failure from a really young age. And my first impression of those nurses were that they were dealing with all of these flashing lights, and then they gave me this heart pillow to write on. And then I saw my grandfather go from gray to pink. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I want to be a heart transplant ICU nurse. And so I went to college, nursing school, traveled around a lot, and then was able to start off in the CVCQ at Johns Hopkins. Throughout nursing school, I became kind of acquainted with the anesthesia world because I had to work full time through school for money reasons. So while I was working as a CNA, during my OB rotation, there was this mom who had a bit of like an unplanned C-section. Baby was having some decelerations in their heart rate. Mom ended up getting a blood transfusion. There was a lot that was happening that I didn't really understand as a nursing student. But I saw this CRNA just lock in with this mom and with their partner and caught like the innocence as mom was throwing up, was explaining everything while handing blood products, and really just like in lockstep with this mom and her partner for what could have been like a very traumatic birth. And I knew I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. So I knew from the time I was like 19 or 20 that I was interested in the nurse anesthesia path. And then COVID kind of threw a curveball in all of it. I was not planning on being a travel nurse. I ended up doing COVID crisis travel nursing for about 2.5 years and I started documenting that experience online. TikTok was something that was totally foreign and new to me, but like so many people, I was missing community and wanted to connect with nurses who were going through a similar traumatic thing that I was, and started just making educational content, documenting my COVID ICU experience. And that was when I started to cross paths with Chrissy, who was already a CRNA. and I will give it over to her from here because it's kind of where our paths come across.
That was a great synopsis of
Yeah.
and I thought that was really nice, Anna. Good little
Yeah.
segue. So my path, like Anna said, was extremely different. I had a suspicion in high school that I might want to go into the medical field because I loved science. I was a total nerd for it. I'm a nerd for a lot of different subjects, honestly. But I had kind of had a lot of mixed advice going into college. A lot of people trying to steer me away from going into the health sciences. And so but I still wanted to help people, quote unquote, right? I still wanted to be in a helping profession. I grew up with a sister with Turner syndrome and autism, and she had a heart condition as well associated with her Turner syndrome. There was a lot of exposure to behavioral health in my household, and my mom working in the special education system. So my first major in college was actually social work. So kind of far away from the medical field. That's kind of where I really enjoyed learning about the humanities and social sciences. But as I continued in my social work education, I really was missing that nerdy piece of me that fell in love with the more traditional STEM sciences in the first place. So out of curiosity, I just kind of signed up for general chemistry and biology just in case. And then I ended up getting a study abroad opportunity where I was able to study abroad in Mexico to complete my Spanish minor. And I got to shadow physicians in Mexico. So when I was down in Mexico in the public hospitals, specifically the women's hospital in Puebla, I ended up having this really unique experience where I had a lot of my paperwork kind of fall through and I wasn't able to continue on with my rotations. So I kind of got stuck there. The anesthesiologist in the women's hospital felt bad for me. She knew I was essentially homeless. Nobody wanted to take me under their wing. So she adopted me for the rest of the semester. And I spent the rest of my semester in anesthesia. And then she would also farm me out to some of her friends in different specialties. But here I was, a social work major, now in an operating room with an anesthesiologist for the rest of my time in Mexico. And it was amazing. It was a completely transformative study abroad experience. I learned so much. I was like, okay, when I go back to the US, I guess I have to rework my plans. I ended up getting my EMT certification. I became a nurse's aide and just kind of tried to figure out what field of healthcare was right for me. I switched my major to psychology so I could kind of salvage my credits. I finished out my biology minor. And then I ended up going back for a second degree in nursing. Yeah, it was kind of this crazy zigzag path. I was getting my nurse's aide experience and working towards getting my second degree in nursing. That's when I discovered what a CRNA was. I never heard of this job before, but the anesthesiologist at the surgery center, he was like, you should think about being a CRNA. And he put me in the ORs with the CRNAs who were the ones who were in the cases. He would be in the pre-op and PACU area. The CRNAs there took the time to mentor me and explain to me what their job was. So that's kind of where I first discovered it. Really a total mistake. And then once I was an ICU nurse, I was more excited to go back to become a CRNA because I really realized that being a CRNA was everything I loved about the ICU, but none of the things I didn't like. I didn't like being pulled in multiple directions. I really liked one-on-one patient care. And I knew that being a CRNA would be exactly that, which it definitely is. People think it's leaving the bedside. I like to tell them I'm closer to the bedside than ever before. And then, I've been a CRNA really since. I've had the pleasure of getting to go to CRNA school in 2015. I graduated in 2017. And here we are.
Oh,
It's
I
amazing.
love that.
I love both of
Yeah.
those stories. It's it's meant to be. You guys were kind of new early on for Anna, and then Chrissy, it was just kind of meant to be for you as well,
It's cool. The trek for one was very convoluted and just
Right.
kind of and then I finished Spanish and I was in Mexico. And then this one's just very no, I know.
Yeah, right.
You know what? And that's so cool about nursing. That's why I always say, enjoy the journey. You just kind of don't know how you're going to get there and wherever you end up. And now you guys have created some other venue of this creative educational space that you've spun off of your other, what I like to say is you have an education, but now you've kind of created something that's yours from your education. So could you tell our listeners kind of what you guys have collaborated on and now created?
I'll get this to you, Chrissy, to start.
Okay. Yeah. So I think this is kind of where our stories pick back up, this was a really nice segue once again. So when I was an ICU nurse, again, this was 2017, things were a little bit different back then.
But I felt like I really didn't have access to any resources that I needed to truly understand my job at a deeper level. ICU nurses are expected to perform at a really high level. We're responsible for a lot of things, especially on night shift when there's not enough help around. We used to just have one second-year surgical resident and a moonlighting attending for 32 beds where we constantly had emergencies going on. The amount of nights I had to just figure things out on my own, I can't even count. After scouring the internet, there was nothing on YouTube. There were no textbooks that really went deep enough. Most information online was really designed for prescribing guidelines, or it's very patient facing and it's too superficial. There really was nothing that answered the why behind we're doing what we're doing that was appropriate for nurses. So once I got into CRNA school, I felt like a light bulb moment happened every single time was in my physiology class. I was always like, wow, had I known this, 6 months prior, a year prior, I would have done such a better job. I would have been so much more confident. I would have been so much less anxious. I would have understood everything so much better. And it felt really unfair that nurses didn't have access to this type of information. So that's really where the idea for Confident Care Academy was born. It wasn't until I started also building a TikTok platform that I really felt like, hey, maybe this can be the vehicle for it. It really just started out with me messing around on my phone in 2019, like having fun. And then it turned into me answering questions and realizing, hey, there's a real opportunity to provide meaningful education here. So that's how I met Anna. I think around like 2020 when she was making her COVID content, I was like, she reminds me so much of myself as a young ICU nurse. Like I can only imagine, like it was so hard during normal times. Like this would be so much harder in a pandemic. And it really just like tugged on my heartstrings seeing her and so many other new nurses going through this period. Like I knew how hard it was even for myself in Philadelphia as a CRNA managing the crisis. Like I just couldn't imagine being a new grad nurse. So that's when we connected and I really liked her education style. It's very similar to mine. And I asked her to join me and build this venture where we could educate ICU nurses together.
That's
So we
awesome.
now, this flash forward 5 years from the time that we met on TikTok. Now 2025, we just got back from NTI, the Clinical Care Nursing Conference in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And we now have, it's a community of over almost 1,100 ICU nurses and nurse anesthesia residents and advanced just registered nurses. There's over 60 different CE approved lectures. We have built out an entire pharmacology library. We have pediatric lectures. We have chemistry lectures. We are diving into the anesthesia content. It's really turned into this place that has a resource and a community for all of these nurses who we wish that we had that. And now we've really created the product and created the community that we wish we had access to. We also do a podcast as well. I just finished CRNA training, so we're about to kick that back up in about August. But it's been so fun to see something that went from like a friendship and then meeting someone on the internet. We met online and now it's grown into like not only an online community, but an in real life community of people who want to know like the why and understand like at the cellular level, what's happening for all of our patients. So that's been really fun to see. We have lots of fun projects coming up that we're excited about.
Yeah.
That's
I was-
great.
I was going to say, Jackie, I don't know if you want to take this one, but I thought a good question would be kind of along the veins of like changing your mission, right? So you go from working for these big institutions as a CRNA, and now you're kind of shifting to creating something that's more mission driven for you personally, right? And I think that's a really neat moment in a nurse's career when kind of like what Jackie and I experienced with our Success NP business as well. Like we went from being nurses to nurse practitioners to now being like, no, this is something that we're passionate about because we want to help. Kind of looking back and reflecting back on helping those that are behind you. I think that's a really neat place in your career, in your kind of spot for where you guys are building. Can you tell a little bit about kind of what that process has been like for you guys to create and with the nurse in mind, right? So I'm no longer thinking about just building myself up, but now I'm thinking about building up others.
I think for me, this has been a very long journey because it takes a lot of years to really build your expertise, right? Earlier, I misspoke. I said 2017 was when I was a nurse. It was 2013. So, you think about like how many years has really gone by since then and how it goes from you personally struggling just to get through your day where you're just so afraid of messing up to then suddenly like you're precepting for the first time, like a year or two in, and you're like, who am I to be teaching anyone anything? Right. And then you go to like the next level where you're challenged in school and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything again. Right. And then
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
right. You take on new challenges continually as you go in your career, taking on new specialties, cardiac anesthesia, OB anesthesia, all these things are like these little learning curves. Eventually you get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm comfortable in my career. I know what I'm doing. It is so rewarding to precept people one-on-one, but you can create such a bigger impact when you are able to teach to a larger group of people. And when you know that they really get it, and then they get to disseminate that same education to their kids, right? Their adult kids,
Mhm.
you get to impact so many more people at once. So as much as I love being a good clinician and taking excellent care of one patient at a time, right? Like I said, I hate being torn in multiple directions. At the same time, I feel like I still have that social work brain in the back of my head where I'm always looking at the macro, right? Like it's so nice to help one person at a time. But when you're an educator, you get to help influence the entire ecosystem and potentially like thousands of patients, right? Instead of just one at a time in your career. I think things are probably really interesting for Anna because she's been kind of straddling two roles recently. So I'm going to hand this to you, Anna, because like you've been in this really interesting position where you've been a learner recently in CRNA school, but still educating and influencing people who are behind you. So this has been like a really interesting process to watch. Do you want to like expand on it a little?
Yeah, well, not to be sappy, but when you go way back to nursing school, whether it's your undergrad or your bachelor's of science and your ADN, we all learn some nursing theory. We learn about like the novice to expert circle. And it's been very interesting to kind of straddle both positions of being a nursing educator and then also being with a new preceptor every single day in an operating room, because often in CRNA training, you go to a new hospital every month. I'm very excited moving forward to have a little bit more like a clear path in terms of every single day I am the one taking care of my patient and then also educating people who come behind me. And we just finished this book, Chrissy and I, The Gap in the Gate. We love reading books together. And I think it's really helpful to look at every single experience as like, what can I learn from this? And what can I take away from this positively? There have been some interactions with some people who are not great preceptors. Some people are incredible clinicians and they're not great teachers. Not everybody who's a good clinician is a good teacher. And then I can take even those somewhat negative experiences and then moving forward, have better interactions with all of my learners who are going to come, because I love teaching and I'm really excited to have my own individual learners one-on-one in the OR. And then like Chrissy said, like I get so much satisfaction from hearing the stories of, I finally understand what milrinone does. I understand what a phosphodiesterase inhibitor is. And I understand how that's going to be an inodilator. And now I precept my orientee and we take better care of our patients. We understand that it has a sick. So you need to understand that it's going to like remain in the system for much longer. So in terms of, to get back to your original question, because we're all yappers here, like how do you design everything with the nurse in mind? I think just as Conflict Care Academy is designed for nurses, and then everything that we do kind of has nurses in mind, honestly. I love living a life where I connect with other largely women in an audience. I love living a life where I get to help nurses in the online education space. I love teaching nurses in the clinical space. And I love making personal content online that's also going to resonate with people. So kind of most things in my life I see are designed for like the nurse in mind who is somebody who just like has a lot of shared experiences. So yeah, I love what we do. It's great.
I just am very happy that we all get to experience like this moment, because the culture's shifting. Like, whereas when we were nursing school, it's very like nurses eat their young. You had to survive. And, we all had good and bad experiences with nurses. And like, if we had had this experience when we were younger, where we could look to Chrissy and Anna or Success NP for those resources, I mean, that would have been a game changer. So I think we all experienced that high, or the satisfaction that Anna was talking about, when someone can say, yeah, or, I totally get it, or you inspired me to go into women's health after precepting with you, or something like that,
Basically, the mindset of nurses has to change in order for us to adapt and grow our profession. To a certain extent, in the medical model, they're very supportive of one another, and kind of,
Sure.
I think partially because it's mostly male dominated, like they tend to kind of work in this way of like, we're supporting one another, whereas nurses are female dominated. And I think to a certain extent, we tend to hold one another down. And I think that's beginning to change. Like, I think we're just realizing like, we can't survive that way. Like, we need to, in order to grow, to support one another. And I think I'm seeing that more and more as I look online. It's just like people are like, no, we're fighting that. Like we're bucking that system of nurses eating their young. Like we can't. We're not going to survive if we do that. We thought we needed to climb on top of each other to get ahead. And I think now we're realizing, no, we need to stand with one another side by side. That's how we move the needle. That's how we get ahead. Yeah.
I think it's a bigger sense of community too, with having all of these resources to look up to, experts in anesthesia and whatnot. It can be a little isolating going from a nurse to a nurse practitioner, CRNA, where you have more autonomy, yes, but you kind of don't have anybody else to kind of lean on so much depending on where you're practicing.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. Community is what we need. I think we're trying to fight that because we just feel too isolated.
I will say, back to what Chrissy said earlier about nursing and anesthesia and advanced practice roles and leaving the bedside versus like not leaving the bedside. People will often ask, like, do you regret choosing CRNA? Do you regret or do you miss anything about being an ICU nurse? And I will say that I feel closer to the bedside than ever doing anesthesia for people, especially like OB anesthesia. Like that's such a nursey thing to just be like sitting beside somebody playing their favorite music, like while they're having their birth experience. I will say that I miss just like giggling with the girlies on night shift, like with like a whole group of like 10, 15 people. That's maybe the only thing that I really miss. And I think that's something that nursing community does really well, is that just like shared experience of like taking care of all your patients together side by side. But I agree with you. I think that we are slowly changing the culture and hopefully making it a more welcoming place.
I want to talk a little bit about changing the culture and how important it is for us to go out of our way to find incentives to do this at the institutional level. Sandra, you brought up just a moment ago how the medical model does a really good job at this.
I hate to interrupt a good conversation, but I have to tell you about the sponsor for the Success NP podcast. Picmonic is a quick and effective aid to help you pass your NP boards. They utilize 2-minute videos that connect difficult to remember facts with unforgettable characters. By tying facts together into ridiculously memorable stories, you'll be able to retain the information for test day. They help reinforce what you learn and track your progress with thousands of built-in rapid review multiple choice quizzes. The use of the intelligent space repetition algorithms automatically adjust to your learning needs, so you'll be reminded to review the right information at the right time, increasing long-term retention. Picmonic is also integrated into the True Learn question bank, so you can study exactly what you need and test your knowledge. Check them out today if you're preparing for board. Link in the show notes.
And one thing that I've learned from working in academic centers for a very long time now is that this is actually designed intentionally in their own system and pay structures. So in order for a residency program to exist, to get federal money for reimbursement so that the hospital can keep running off of labor that is essentially free and paid for by the federal government, the medical college, in order to appoint the physicians, in order to give them their promotions to assistant professorship, to tenureship, they have to either do research or teach. So about half of the physicians in the hospital system will teach. And in order to teach, they need to be evaluated by their learners. Their medical students and their residents evaluate how effective they are at teachers. And if you are a mean preceptor, if you are a mean man, you are not going to get your promotion. You're not going to get your pay raise, right? So this is actually designed all the way at the top from the Centers for Medicare reimbursement, CMS, all the way down to the bottom. Like this is very intentionally structured. And we don't have the same type of pay structure incentives in nursing. There is no reward for being a nice teacher. Oftentimes, this is just one more thing added to someone's plate. We don't take the time in school to teach people how to precept, to teach people how to teach, and education in it itself is its own degree, right? You can get a doctorate degree in just learning how to be an educator, an EDD. Like it is not something that comes natural to most people, and we don't really incentivize it for nursing. So, you also touched on the community piece, how this can be very isolating, becoming an NP, becoming a CRNA. So we don't have our homies to kiki with on night shift, right? We don't have our friends. We don't have our besties.
Well said, Chrissy.
Everybody is incentivized to take you under their wing.
Right.
We're given the tools or structures to do so. Whereas in the medical community, there is again, the tools in place to do so. So, how do we create that? Well, on the back end, of course, it's really nice in programs like Success NP and Confident Care Academy, we're creating our own communities. That's great. We really are a Band-Aid solution to a systemic problem, though. And I really think that in our own institutions, we do need to be creating formal preceptor programs and formal reward structures for teaching people and nurturing people in the field. And institutions that do this find a lot of success. I'm glad that my current institution does do this for our new CRNAs. We have formal mentorship programs. We have formal preceptor classes where we're actually taught like a structure that we're supposed to precept. And I do think it helps. But this is definitely not the norm in the nursing world at all. And I definitely hope that that changes.
Absolutely.
I'll add in, as someone who just completed training, just to agree with you, Chrissy, on the medical model being tied often to one specific academic institution, and then just levels of buy-in from said institution in relation to nursing higher education. So I have not completed acute care NP program, or like some people, like others have. However, there's often you go to many different hospitals and there's no facility level buy-in into your education. And so often there's less, like Chrissy said, there's less sort of incentive to invest heavily in the education of the APRN learners. As we have now, we're looking at budget cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and then also the Grad Plus funding, which is what enables graduate learners to go to medical nurse practitioner and CRNA school. I'm interested to see what changes happen in the future, and I hope that we get institution level buy-in to APRN education. So, for example, for CRNA school, if tuition is $200,000 and I'm only eligible for $60,000 student loan, I'm not going to be able to go unless I get my tuition essentially bought by a hospital. And then if I train almost exclusively at that hospital, there would be incentive then for my education at the institution level buy-in.
Yes.
So I think a return to the primary site model would be really beneficial for us as learners. And then, like Chrissy's saying, systemic level buy-in so that there's rewards for positive behavior outside of just recruitment for staff. I know other programs for APRN education, they don't even guarantee you clinical site often. Like sometimes you have to go out and find those yourselves, that's not rewarding buy-in, you know?
No.
All
Go
good
ahead,
points
Jackie.
for sure. I think a lot of the questions that people have are kind of like going from an ICU nurse to CRNA. What's the difference? What's your day-to-day pros, cons? Maybe I know that's like a lot to ask, but maybe summarize.
Do you want to take this one, Anna? I think this is a great one.
Yeah,
for
sure.
the compare and contrast since it's so recent for you.
Yeah.
So it's really fresh for me. What's different in your day in and day out between being an ICU nurse and being a nurse anesthetist or a nurse anesthesia trainee? So I was a ICU nurse in like all of the different ICUs. I floated to every ICU. When you go in to be an ICU nurse, you get your 1 to 3 patient assignment, and then you are participating in their plan of care for the course of the day. When you are a nurse anesthetist or a nurse anesthesia trainee, you could be doing anywhere from 1 case to 17 cases in a day if you're doing GI. I love that every day is different. So one day you'll be doing OB, you'll be doing epidurals and spinals and C-sections, and then pre-op consents, and then going through your B on OB all day long. The next day you might be doing robotic appendectomies, like a bunch of robotic surgeries. The day after that, you might be doing hip replacements and knee replacements. I love the variety. So one thing that keeps everything fresh, and I feel that anyone who is a travel nurse before choosing their APRN journey will agree, I love the variety. I like changing it up. So people will often say, who are not nurse anesthetists, they'll say anesthesia is boring. I disagree really strongly. I think that it is not boring at all. You are going to have such different days and there's so much variety in anesthesia. I think eventually, if you've been a CRNA for 10 years like Chrissy, you will find things routine, but I don't find anything boring. So your day's going to vary a lot. Instead of caring for 1 to 3 patients as an ICU nurse, you're caring for anywhere from 1 to 17 patients in a shift. And I'll hit it over to Chrissy because there's a lot of questions layered in that question. In the transition.
I guess one of the biggest differences is also, Anna mentioned, sometimes you have just one patient for the entire day. Like if you have a really big cardiac surgery case, a really long spine surgery, difficult to access brain tumor, right? And sometimes you do have a ton of really quick cases for patients that are relatively simple. So as an ICU nurse, I felt like you have so much involvement with the patient and their family, and you're with them for 12 hours straight. And sometimes you have them 3 days in a row. And sometimes they're on your unit for 3 months, right? You get to know patients really well. As a CRNA, I often have only 15 minutes to get to know my patient. I read about them, I meet them, we chit chat, we catch up. and then I'm putting them to sleep, right? Like, it is very interesting how you have to be super, ultra, ultra, ultra thorough. And at the same time, you have a very limited time to get to know them. And then you're responsible for everything, like everything about them. Like, you can't miss anything at all. So the stakes are definitely really high in that way. I know, like, as a new grad ICU nurse, one of the hardest things is learning time management. And you're trying to manage, like, looking at the labs and the orders and reading the H&P and understanding the plan of care. And now it's time for morning rounds. And like, it's a lot of responsibility in the first like 3 hours of your shift. You got to document everything. As a CRNA, you have to know like every single thing right off the bat within the first 5 minutes of meeting them. So it's like definitely a little bit of a mindset shift, but you get really good at it. You can get really good at anything that you do every single day. So just because it's a challenge or just because it's new doesn't mean that you're not capable. It just means you haven't done it yet. So don't be
Oh, I
afraid.
love that. That's good. I love that. I might steal that, Chrissy. That's
It's all reps.
I just was asking because I was like, I always hear people say, if I would have done it again, I would have been a CRNA. I always hear people say that. And I always have kind of in the back of my personal mind, I don't know if I was asked this question. I'll have to check Instagram to see if anybody's asked any questions. But can an NP become a CRNA? What's the path? So if I were to like, hey, I have a doctorate in nursing, and now I decide I want to be a CRNA, or even I'm just from the nursing spot, kind of walk us through the steps just briefly for someone that's like, okay, I'm thinking about it. What can I do to get there?
People do it. It's going to be easier for some people than others, depending on what type of nursing experience you had before you were an NP and also what type of NP you are right now. But at the end of the day, all CRNA schools require you to be an ICU nurse at the time of application. So if you are a family nurse practitioner working in primary care, you're going to have to go back to the bedside in the ICU and get your ICU experience. And most places will still want you to have 2 years of ICU experience. That being said, I do know some acute care NPs that are working inpatient in an ICU, and CRNA schools have accepted that and said, okay, that counts. Like, you're actively managing critically ill patients in an ICU, like, close enough. Other people have had like, oh, they were an ICU nurse. They went to NP school. They became an NP. They were away from the bed, like from that role for a little bit. And then, they go back to the ICU and then they apply right away. I've seen that happen a few times as well, but you will have to get into the ICU one way or another and be an ICU nurse when you're applying for sure. So that's the only like downside. It can kind of feel like a step backwards for some people, but if it's something you're really truly interested in, I encourage you to network and shadow and see what it's like in the operating room. Spend time with CRNAs, see what it's really like one-on-one in person. It is a very rewarding career. And it's a career you can do for a very long time. I don't know many bedside nurses who are in their 80s that are still working in an ICU. I do know a lot of CRNAs that are still picking up per diem in their 70s, in their 80s. Like, they are doing it for their cruise ship money. Like, it's good for them, right? You're going to have until you're 80.
I love that.
I don't know. It could be worth just going back for that 1 or 2 years in the ICU. I'll sacrifice in the grand scheme of things for sure.
I was just going to add to the path. Some CRNA programs may accept a handful of your nurse practitioner credits. Many places will not accept more than like 1 or 2 classes. I see it's in the realm of often like a health assessment class or a doctoral research level class, or like their microbiology or their biostatistics. You're going to have to go through the entirety of a CRNA curriculum, which is all 3 years. But you may have 1 or 2 semesters that are a little bit lighter because they accept your biostatistics or your health equity class or something like that. Versus for CRNAs who go into acute care nurse practitioner, often it's a postmaster certificate completion program, which can be completed in a shorter level of time. However, it's very doable. I know of a couple of people even right now who just finished their CRNA training who are former nurse practitioners or former acute care nurse practitioners. It's very doable, but it's a 3-year process.
Going back to
What
the
were you gonna say,
application
Jackie?
process. So we had a question about how to make your resume stand out when you apply to CRNA school, given that like a lot of the requirements are the same for every ICU nurse. What would be the way to make you stand out, I guess, I would say.
I think that CRNA school application is one of the most stressful parts of becoming CRNA.
Yeah.
Because it is like, here's everything that I've ever done, and here's all my work on a piece of paper. Please tell me I'm good enough. And then somebody just looks at a piece of paper and rejects you or accepts you. It's so hard to feel that your entire self-worth is just listed on a 1 to 2 page piece of paper. And we all have the same on paper, right? We all have a couple years of ICU experience, good grades, community involvement, volunteering, research, maybe. Just, it's hard to say, but accept that you look the same as everyone else on paper. One thing that we do recommend is shadowing extensively. You want to know that this is something that's worth taking out $200,000, $300,000 for. You want to know actually what the role is. And then we also say to go to your state level. And if you can afford it and it's within your realm of like financial reason, go to the annual AANA conference. So you're going to network with people who are nurse anesthetists. You're going to get to know the political landscape and the places where you want to go to school. It's really good for networking. Also, if you are not close to an AANA conference, we say to get involved in your nursing critical care conferences. So go to things like NTI, get involved in critical care nursing conferences. This is going to show that you are an engaged member of the profession now, which will foreshadow that you're going to be an engaged member of the profession when you graduate CRNA school. And those are the people that you're looking to bring into the profession. People who are not going to just go clock in, clock out, make their money and go home. We want to get people who are going to be involved or are going to help advance the profession forward. Yeah. Chrissy, what do you have to add in terms of like resume?
I'll say one thing that I very rarely see on people's resumes or applications that I think really does help you stand out is research experience. This is something that a lot of nurses don't have at all in their repertoire. And a lot of people just simply don't want to put the time into. It's very common for people to accumulate a million micro credentials like CCRN, CMC, CSC, like just, name that micro credential. They've added that letter to their name.
Yeah.
They just keep taking tests. But believe it or not, that's not what most program directors truly value. Like, yes, your CCRN is often a requirement. For those who are listening, that's your critical care registered nurse exam. Yes, if there's another certification that's truly representative of who you care for in your unit, great, go for it. But it is much more important to show professional engagement. So like Anna said, the conferences is a great way to show that. Shadowing a lot, showing you're really serious is a great way to show that. Research is a way to show that you are serious about making your current profession better, even where you are right now. It's a great way to get involved, and it's a great way to prepare yourself for the doctoral work that you'll be doing in CRNA school. All of the programs are DNP programs right now. So this is something that's a very unique way to stand out that most people don't do. But if you really want a little extra boost that's going to help pull you out of the paper pile, I think that's a great hack.
Great advice. Yeah.
No, that is good advice. I was thinking while you were talking, if they were all doctoral programs, so you answered that question. And then and I heard this, is it true that if you are a CRNA, you can work as a nurse practitioner as well? I've heard that said. I didn't know if it was true. And somebody told me that. And I was like, I don't know if that's true or not. If you work as a CRNA, you cannot go be a primary care nurse practitioner. Or can you?
Definitely not.
Just work as a CRNA. No. And is that state specific or is that just across the board?
That is across the board because we are not credentialed or board certified trained nurse practitioners, right? And we're not trained in it either. Exactly. There are a few states that do give us prescriptive authority outside of the operating room. So that might be what that person was referring to. I believe two of them that come to mind are New Hampshire and Idaho. So for example, if I wanted to work in like an acute pain clinic and do something that's relevant to my scope and prescribe like pain medication outside of the operating room, that would be acceptable, but it would be inappropriate for me to see patients as like a primary care provider, for example.
Yeah. I thought the same.
Even in the states where I trained in New Mexico, that was the case as well. We had prescriptive authority outside of the operating room. So like Chrissy said, it was relevant to the practice of anesthesia, but you could open ketamine clinics, you could open pain clinics. You will occasionally see CRNAs with prescriptive authority also dabbling in the prescribing Botox world.
Yes.
That's not particularly relevant to the practice of anesthesia. And it's not something, I think that there's an entire decades of training that goes into injecting the face. So I'm going to leave that to people who have done decades of training in injecting the face.
Agreed.
But yes, as you can, if you have prescriptive authority in the state that you're practicing in, you can open a pain clinic, you can open a ketamine clinic, you can work in acute pain, things like that.
Yeah. That clarifies.
Okay. Yeah. So how do you see the roles of CRNAs evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's a good question.
Well, we just got thrown a curveball with this House bill that just passed for CMS, Medicare, Medicaid cuts. So the answer depends on whether this bill gets passed through the Senate or not. But I think as reimbursement will likely get cut for hospitals and facilities, I think we're going to see a very big financial strain on every single department, and that includes anesthesia. The medical direction model, where in a lot of larger institutions, we have one anesthesiologist working with 2 CRNAs at a time or 3 CRNAs at a time, is extremely burdensome from a cost perspective. It's extremely expensive. So I do think we're going to see more relaxed supervision ratios where institutions that were quite spoiled and keeping us in a 1-to-2 ratio will now be moving to 1-to-4. Institutions that were in 1-to-4 ratios might move to a medical supervision model, have up to 8 rooms at once that an anesthesiologist is supervising. We might see more collaborative anesthesia teams where rather than an anesthesiologist supervising CRNAs, each provider is just providing their own care in the room 1-to-1. And there's just 1 or 2 people out in case of emergencies for help. I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future for the profession, for sure.
I'll add for people who are maybe listening for the first time about anesthesia politics specifically, that the average age of an anesthesia provider, whether they're a CRNA or a physician anesthesiologist, is over the age of 50. The need for surgical care in the United States is rising as we have an aging U.S. population. And then, like Chrissy said, we're facing potential massive Medicare and Medicaid cuts to reimbursement for hospitals nationwide. So I completely agree. I'll just echo what Chrissy said. I do not believe that we have the finance. First of all, there's not a need to continue in a medical direction model from a patient safety perspective. We have the data that we have indicates that CRNAs provide very safe care. So as funding becomes tight and then we have fewer providers who are available to provide this care, I believe that the role of CRNAs is only going to continue to expand in the future. I had the opportunity to train in a collaborative anesthesia team model for the majority of my training in New Mexico, which is where both CRNAs and physician anesthesiologists are direct providing anesthesia. And then there's one physician anesthesiologist who hangs out of the numbers. It will give breaks to everyone and then can help with difficult air wings or can teach nerve block to providers. That model is efficient, it's safe, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future.
Yeah. I'll say that I think it'll be the same for NPs just working in the different areas as well. Like you're describing, we're going to have to step up because again, the population of physicians and primary care is just not lucrative and they're just not going into these areas to work anymore. And so nurse practitioners are going to be the ones kind of filling those holes and those gaps in care. And again, we have shown to provide very good care. And I think kind of going back and echoing what you're saying about kind of being in a more collaborative space with physicians and collaborating with one another as nurse practitioners and having more nurse educators to help fill those gaps and those gaps in education that we may kind of step into the workplace and just feel like, whoa, I don't feel prepared for this. I think it's only going to increase the demand for other nurses to educate in the special ways that they do. So I think it's just going to demand an increase in all these specialties and these different areas of potential creation for NPs and other nurse creators. I think it's going to be really cool.
I just wanted to say that I have family members that have taken your course and they just wanted to echo the sentiment that it helped them tremendously. So they wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, I love the Conflict Care Academy crew. It's so many bright and brilliant nurses, and we're just so proud of them.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So cool. All right, so for the last part of our episode, we do rapid fire. Are you ladies ready for rapid fire? All right. So, okay, what is your favorite type of food? Either one. Chrissy, it's rapid. It's just got to come out.
Love the answer. Everything Asian food. If it's Asian, I like it. All of the continent of Asia, all of it.
Mexican food.
Mexican. All right. And then, what was your first job ever? So like you're like a baddie CRNA. This is the pinnacle. This is the top nurse creator. What were your humble beginnings?
Cashier in a grocery store. Wall bounds. They're out of business now.
Belay. 7 years. That's a lie. 4 years.
It felt like 7, but I only did 4. Felt like 7.
In dog years. Yeah.
And then if you could go back and not have to learn a subject in school, what would it be? Would it be like, you're like, this one I was just glad to graduate from and put it to bed? Like, which was it? Chrissy.
Yeah, going back to the nerd, yeah.
The nerd.
I love learning. Chemistry. I did not enjoy chemistry.
Just finish it. Put it to bed. Chemistry. Well, ladies, this has been so much fun. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yes, thank you.
For those that want to find you, where can they find each of you?
You can find us both at the Confident Care Academy website, confidentcareacademy.com. You could join our platform, join our membership. And then, of course, we also have an Instagram and a podcast, Confident Care Academy. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You could find myself at Chrissy CRNA on all platforms. And Anna, I'll let you give your handles.
Yeah, you can find me on all platforms at Anna J RRNA. By the time this is published, it'll probably be Anna J CRNA.
How about?
And then essentially Confident Care Academy on all platforms. Come hang out with us. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Thank
guys,
you,
thanks for
guys.
hanging out with us on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. We really
Thanks
had
for
a great
having us.
time.
Yeah. And as always, we have a Success MP quote of the day. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence by Charles Schwab. And so, guys, just stay persistent. The journey from whatever you're going from nursing all the way to CRNA to NP, just stay on it. Don't give up. And yeah, thanks for hanging out with us on this episode, and subscribe and check you later.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Success NP. We hope today's discussion has shed some light on the diverse career options or taught you how to improve your clinical practice as a nurse practitioner.
Remember, whether you're considering a specialization, pursuing advanced certifications, or exploring non-traditional roles, there's a wealth of opportunities out there waiting for you. Be sure to subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode, and leave us a 5-star review. It helps the podcast grow. The Success and Peace podcast is on the World Wide Web, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and X. So subscribe to our newsletter for updates on new podcast episodes and other information to help you on your own NP journey. You can always message us at successnpeacepodcast@gmail.com with any NP podcast episodes or topics you'd like us to discuss.
Until next time, take care. Stay curious and keep advancing your careers as a nurse practitioner. And just a friendly reminder, the information on this podcast is for educational purposes only. The information should not be used in substitute for professional care by a medical provider. The information on this podcast does not represent medical or professional advice or services.
Bye for now.